It is October 5th, 2022. The time is 6:36 p.m. Our mission is to provide a safe and caring climate and culture in which we engage. I'll come back to that. Our mission is to provide a safe and caring climate and culture in which we engage, inspire, educate, prepare, and empower all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today's and tomorrow's society. And I apologize, I'm not sure if I said that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and viewing information can be found on the district website. And Dr. Green is not here, so Vice Chair Al Dahlgren, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And then can you please call roll?
Yes. Scott Andreasen.
Here.
Natalie Copeland.
Sorry about that. Here.
Al Dahlgren is here. Zach Dorholt. Dr. Les Green is not here this evening. Shannon Haas.
Here.
Monica Segura Schwartz.
Here.
The following cabinet members and staff are present at the District Administration Office. Superintendent, Dr. Lori Putnam. Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education, Kay Nelson. Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Education, Dr. Mike Rivard. Executive Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations, Tracy Flynn Bowe. Executive Director of Learning and Teaching, Lori Posch. Executive Director of Operations, Gary Ganji. Media technicians, Paul Novak and Gordy Scott, and the custodian on site is Steve Hain. The following cabinet members and staff are virtually present. Director of Community Engagement and Communications, Tammy DeLand. Director of Equity Services, Ian Omar. Director of Innovation and Instructional Technology, Ryan Cox. Executive Director of Community Education, Adam Holm. Executive Director of Finance and Business Services, Amy Scalarud. Executive Director of Research, Assessments, and Enrollment, Donna Roper. Executive Director of Student Services and Special Education, Carol Potter. Executive Assistant, Jan McGuire.
Thank you. Next, I'm looking for a motion to approve tonight's Board of Education meeting agenda and work session agenda.
So move.
I have a motion by Scott and a second by Zach. Al, can you please call roll again?
Scott Andreasen.
Yes.
Zach Dorholt. Natalie Copeland.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren is yes. Shannon Haas.
Yes.
Monica Segura Schwartz.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board adopts routinely without debate. Any single member may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. On tonight's consent agenda, item A, approval of personnel staff changes. Item B, approval of monthly treasurer's report for August 2022. Item C, approval of monthly financial reports for August 2022. Item D, Clearview Controlled Entrance Project Change Order totaling a negative $765.51. Item E, Catherine Johnson Project Change Order totaling $18,846. Item F, Talahi HVAC Project Change Order totaling $13,742. Item G, Joint Purchasing Contract Award, Apollo HVAC Equipment. Item H, Call for Bids, Discovery HVAC Project. And item I, approve Board Policy 799, third reading, fundraising by booster clubs, school support groups as revised. Does any board member wish to remove an item from tonight's consent agenda? Okay, then I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion by Scott and a second by Natalie. Al, can you please call roll?
Scott Andreasen,
Yes.
Natalie Copeland.
Yes.
Zach Dorhold, Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Monica Segura Schwartz. And Al Dahlgren is yes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the single report of Board of Education Standing Committee reports. Natalie, do you have an Achievement, Integration, and Equity Committee report? Natalie Copeland, Committee Chair. I sure can. Monica, Board Development Policy and Governance Committee. We're probably pulling that one up, and I can, do you want me to table the Personnel Negotiations Committee report?
No, I have it here.
You have it, so
So
Wanna
I'll
rock it over
start
there?
with Personnel Negotiations Committee minutes. So in October, we met October 4, yesterday. We reviewed board policies to 10, 410, 413, 414, and 415 in preparation for the board review today. We review the draft of memorandum of agreement related to return to work after retirement agreements during the 3-year time period that for TRA annuities has been waived by the legislature. And we discussed the superintendent goals in preparation for board review on the 19th of this month. And that ends the Personnel Negotiation Committee meetings report. So I'll continue with board development report.
okay.
Thank you. So for that, we review board policies to 10, 410, 413, 14, 414, and 415. So I got twice. So on reviewed recommendations for the survey for board members for high school administration. Remember about we brought to the agenda the youth participation or youth input for board. So we talk about that. We wanted to have, in terms of concern, we wanted to be clear about options. We wanted to have a recommendation from the administration about a range of possibilities that could happen there. And if you have any comment or anything that you would like to add or would like to see, please email Mike or Kate about that, or Dr. Ponen. And that's it.
Thank you. Sounds like a busy meeting. And Natalie, are you ready?
Yeah, sorry, my computer is having issues with internet right now, so I have my handy dandy phone to look it up. So we had one meeting topic, and it was quite a robust conversation. It was about well-rounded education for our students, visioning that, just the beginning of that discussion. We discussed the need to engage our stakeholders in a conversation on elementary and middle school education in the school district. We discussed the questions we might ask, the stakeholders we would engage, and the process we could use. Previously, several board members had asked administration to examine what a well-rounded education means. Our committee adjusted that slightly to charge administration to determine, outside of state mandated standards, what do we want students at the elementary and middle level to know and be able to do when leaving our schools? And what experiences do we want them to have? Administration will consider our committee feedback and bring the conversation back to us following further review. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, October 19th. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have future agenda items. So October regular board meeting topics will include North Junior High School presentation, superintendent entry plan report and vision, and of course, some policy readings. So at this time, does any board member want to suggest a future agenda item? Board Policy Development and Governance will review the request and report on their recommendations. We're good. We got another record here, at least in this part. That adjourns. It is 6:46 PM adjourns our regular board meeting and opens up our Board of Education work session. So first up, we have kindergarten play update, and we are very excited about this. Let's have Lori Posch, Executive Director of Learning and Teaching, do some introducing, and we are ready. So thank you for your team being here.
Thank you. Good evening, Board Chair Haas, Superintendent Putnam, and school board members. I have the honor tonight to reintroduce you, because I think all of you know her, Laura Stebner, who is the Director of Elementary Curriculum for our district. And Laura has been instrumental in helping to facilitate our reinsurance of kindergarten play in our district. Some of you may remember that when Dr. Beisch was here, this was something that was very, very important to her. And prior to her retirement was something that she really wanted to make sure that we brought back and that we really built on. So Laura and a wonderful team of kindergarten teachers are going to share with you tonight some of the information around why this is important to us and what we've been doing in our district. So enjoy, get ready.
Chair Haas, Superintendent Putnam, and members of the board, I am pleased to be here tonight to highlight kindergarten play. Kindergarten play has been identified as a district initiative, and my hope tonight is to highlight for you the important role kindergarten play has in building the foundation for all future learning. If you've been around the field of education for a while and you've spent any time talking with kindergarten teachers, they will often say things like, kindergarten is different, and kindergartners need to play. They don't typically say they want to play or they like to play. They say kindergartners need to play. And if you haven't spent time digging deeply into developmental best practices for 5-year-olds, it can be easy to think of play as a break in the day for young learners, or an enjoyable activity that kids like, that we build into their school experience. But I would like to illustrate today how play is actually one of the most impactful learning strategies that we can employ, and actually helps us to set the stage and set the foundation for the work of our strategic plan. So you might be looking at this picture and wondering to yourself, how are these children being college and career ready or innovative? And so to help set the stage tonight, I'd like to spend some time sharing a few quotes from a 2019 report entitled Rethinking Kindergarten, Taking Back Kindergarten, Rethinking Rigor for Our Youngest Learners. This report is by Dr. Sandy Husk, who is a national leader in education and is currently the CEO of ASCD. And my hope in sharing these quotes is to show the direct connections between play and these components of our strategic plan: positive climate and culture, instruction that produces positive outcomes, innovation, and career and post-secondary options. So the first quote is this: playful learning allows children to notice, wonder, and persist. The experience of play changes the connections of the neurons at the front of your brain, and those changes are critical in learning to regulate emotions, make decisions, and solve problems. Our district is committed to integrating social and emotional learning supports for our students. And when students gather in front of a dollhouse, they are doing much more than moving figures and furniture. They are showing up as their full selves. They are learning to thrive with the others in their classroom environment. Social and emotional learning is really and truly integrated at its best when we allow children time to play. We are literally giving them the opportunity to grow their brain, to increase their capacity to make decisions, and to regulate. The next quote I'd like to share connects directly to instruction that produces positive outcomes. What Dr. Husk has found is a growing body of behavioral research establishes relationships between children's play and development in several areas, including language, executive function skills, mathematics and spatial skills, scientific thinking, and social and emotional development. As students play, they produce language. And it's fun to talk to kindergarten teachers because that language isn't always the same. And yet students produce it together as they collaborate and learn. They make and execute plans, and as they play, they build their background knowledge, and they do that across content areas. Play isn't a break from academic learning, it really is academic learning. This year, our district has added innovation as part of our strategic plan. And when we think about what we mean by that, we say we want a culture where all stakeholders respond to challenges by thinking innovatively. As children play, we put them on the path to becoming innovators. Dr. Husk says guided play-based activities that help children learn to take academic risks and assume ownership for their learning can lead to far-reaching gains for young children as they continue their educational careers with a greater sense of agency. And here I'd like to hone in on academic risks. We cannot expect to graduate students who are innovative thinkers if we haven't built comfort with risk-taking. By giving children opportunities to play, we empower them and put them on the path to innovation. And we all know the deep commitment our district has to ensuring our students are career and college ready. In fact, we provide career and work skills related curriculum and instruction to all PK-12 students. So when I'm asked what this looks like in kindergarten and I respond with play, I'm sometimes met with surprise. But I want you to think about the resources that you viewed before the board meeting and think about our employability skills. I want you to imagine a room full of kindergartners playing with those resources in a way that does not involve collaboration. Is it possible to play without curiosity and creativity? And when children work together to come up with an imaginary world and think about how to bring that to life, they collaborate and they think critically. Dr. Husk says play serves a critical role in the development of long-term cognitive skills that will help enable children to become college and career ready in later years. Research has demonstrated that children who experience more active, child-initiated early learning experiences perform better in later school years. Play helps our students to become college and career ready. My hope in sharing these quotes was to help illustrate the deep and complex role that play has in connecting to our strategic plan and building that foundation. After establishing that for you tonight, I wanted to take some time to dig into a few significant events that happened in the world of education that really impacted play on a national level. And I share this tonight because it's important to the history of play across the nation, but it's important to the history of play in District 742 as well. So even though it was decades ago, President Reagan's report, A Nation at Risk, really began this movement towards standards and increased assessment in the world of education. From there, No Child Left Behind ushered in a new era in education. And as districts grappled with how to best prepare their students for these upcoming assessments in third grade, they started to rethink kindergarten classrooms and rethink what rigor looked like. And again, this happened across our nation in an effort to help students be prepared for the assessments that lay ahead of them and prepare them academically. Often competencies that were typically reserved for first grade were introduced in kindergarten, with the intent that by exposing students to content earlier, they would be more prepared. District 742 was not exempt from this line of thinking. And in fact, over a decade ago, there was some intentional decision-making around increasing instructional minutes in math and literacy. Again, with that intended outcome, preparing students academically. An unintended consequence of that increase in instructional minutes was often a decrease in play. And a decrease in play often prevented students from having the foundational skills they needed to do the type of learning we were asking them to do. This is the reality of what happened, and it is one of those things that we see in education. When we know better, we do better, and the conversation around kindergarten across the nation did begin to change, and we changed along with that. I mentioned the report that I shared with you was published in 2019, Taking Back Kindergarten. And around that time, there was more and more conversation around how do we rethink kindergarten? Are we giving kids the tools that we need in a developmentally appropriate way? And in 2019, District 742 took some time to examine kindergarten as well. And at this time, Dr. Marcia Beisch and Lori Posch became curious about the practices in our kindergarten classrooms, and they started to think about how they could learn more. Dr. Beisch, as a former kindergarten teacher, had a high level of expertise in this area that she could bring to the conversation, and her partnership with Lori Posch was instrumental in gathering data to help us understand our reality and how to move forward. The two of them partnered to generate a list of materials and practices that they would expect to see, and visited 29 classrooms across our district, which was the majority of classrooms at that time. When they collected that data, it led them to be able to draw some conclusions about kindergarten. And the first conclusion that they were able to draw was that there seemed to be a misconception that kindergarten classrooms were either rigorous or play-centered, and that those two things maybe didn't coexist. And I'd like to just take a moment to describe some of the adjectives that can help us understand rigor. Rigor is problem solving. Rigor is adaptability, being agile. Rigor is thinking critically. Some of the same things we talked about play. So those two really can coexist, but the data showed us that there was a misconception in our district around this idea. And we were able to draw two really technical conclusions as well. One was that most of our teachers simply did not have the robust resources that were needed in order to have effective play in their classrooms, and that our new teachers had not been given the training and modeling in kindergarten play. Many of our district kindergarten teachers were there to onboard other teachers, but we had some teachers who were a new team and didn't have that role model, and our district needed to prioritize the modeling and training for all kindergarten teachers. So once we were able to draw these conclusions, we moved to action, and we established our kindergarten task force in 2019. The purpose of this task force was to identify expectations for young learners in kindergarten classrooms that are aligned with best practices, as well as develop a plan for implementation. This task force was comprised of kindergarten teachers, as well as school and district administrators, and the actions that they took were these. They started by reviewing the current research. What was the new information coming out in the field of education around kindergarten? And not all of it was new. Some of it was that relearning. They compared that to 742 practices. What were the strengths? And what were some of the growth areas for us in our kindergarten classrooms? From there, this team was able to create kindergarten-specific district expectations that we wanted to see happening in all of our classrooms to provide clarity around the vision for kindergarten. These expectations included a modification of those instructional minutes that I mentioned earlier to include more time for play. In fact, 2 blocks daily of play for kindergarteners each day. There was also materials and room arrangement guidelines set up for teachers to help them understand what are the efficient and effective ways to set up play, and specific best practices for play, including the teacher moves that happen during kindergarten play. This team was also passionate about ensuring access and equity for all of our kindergartners when it came to resources. And so they worked to create a list of baseline play materials that needed to be in all classrooms in order to support this type of learning for students. And they started to think about the professional development needs. If we were to put forth new expectations for kindergarten teachers, what kinds of support would they need to be able to meet those expectations? From this planning stage, we moved to implementation. We began by purchasing materials. So we surveyed all of our kindergarten teachers with that baseline list. And we asked them, what do you have and what do you need? And we filled the gaps. And we did that in the spring of 2020, which is kind of important to this story because we were at home during this time. And our kindergarten teachers were teaching their kindergartners at home. And yet, the members of this task force worked to develop a robust Schoology course called The Power of Play. This team came together, they created videos, they created modules for their kindergarten colleagues, and although they were at home learning to teach kindergartners online, 90% of our kindergarten teachers participated during that first spring. This course is now available for new teachers as they enter the district as a way to onboard them to the vision of play-based learning. We also knew tangible tools would be important for our kindergarten teachers, and so the team worked to create model schedules. Teachers who hadn't previously been incorporating 2 sections of play were given opportunities to think through how that could look from veteran kindergarten teachers who helped them create and craft those schedules. And something like labels, which is great for vocabulary and exposure for students, but very time consuming for teachers, was something this task force advocated for. How do we create and print those and get those out to classrooms so that when we're asking teachers to rise to expectations, we're supporting them along the way? And we know that continued commitment is part of a district initiative. It's not that initial implementation and we stop there. And so we've continued to have our task force meet. As they have met, they have gathered and reviewed teacher feedback related to play implementation, and they've been able to think about what are some additional resources that would help support this in our classrooms. One of the professional development pieces that I was proud of our team this last year was that a need came to the task force that there were some teachers new to kindergarten who were pleased to have a wealth of resources, but were trying to figure out, how do I manage placing all of these, and what does it look like to have kids move through the space? And so we did creative on-site professional development, bringing veteran kindergarten teachers into classrooms in the summer to walk side by side with teachers as they learn to set up their spaces. We've been grateful to have district financial support to continue to think about what we can add to classrooms. The baseline materials were added in 2020, and our science-focused materials that you saw on the table in the other room were added in 2021 in response to our task force and teachers saying, we need more opportunities for kids to dig into science. And this year we've added some rotating resources. So we think about how can we create some resources that maybe 2 or 3 teachers share. If you've been a parent, you know how exciting it is when the new play things come in, and this is an opportunity to be really mindful of cost, but make sure that kids are getting exposure to new toys and new resources as they play. Like all of our district initiatives, we have a measurement plan for kindergarten play, and we're measuring 2 components, both implementation fidelity and impact on students. For implementation fidelity, we're asking ourselves, are we doing what we set out to do? And we find that out through teacher assessments and future classroom walkthroughs. And for impact on students, we're looking at report cards. Our kindergarten teachers give feedback to our students on both social and emotional learning and academic outcomes on the report cards. And by looking at those across our system, we're able to see what impact and what change do we see as the year goes on and from year to year as we've implemented play. So this is where we get to the fun part. We have talked about how play connects to our strategic plan. We've talked about how things changed in kindergarten and changed back. And we've talked about this task force and how they have implemented play. But we're going to talk a little bit about standards-based instruction now. So you might be thinking, how do these things coexist, right? Don't kindergarten teachers have Minnesota state standards that they need to instruct students in? And how does that work with play? And so tonight, I'm going to ask you to engage in some play so that we can actually model this for you here in the board meeting. So before we do that, I'm going to give you a couple of directions and a couple pieces of information. So first, I've got 2 kindergarten math standards for you. You don't need to memorize these. These don't have to dictate how you play, but I want you to have an awareness of some of the standards that happen in our kindergarten classroom. So here's 2 math standards for kindergarten, okay? Now I'm going to invite some of our district kindergarten staff to actually pass out some play materials for you. So please join me in welcoming Amy Jensen and Lindsay Olson from Madison and Pam Stang from Westwood. They're actually gonna get these tubs over here and they're gonna bring one to each of you. So I'm gonna give them a chance to do that. While they are passing these out, you're going to be thinking about how you're going to play. So this is going to be a big deal, right? Grown-ups don't always play the same way that kids do. But in giving the opportunity for you to play, these kindergarten teachers are actually going to be able to model for you what it looks like and sounds like and feels like in a kindergarten classroom when kindergartners are playing and teachers are engaging in standards-based instruction. So when you get your materials, I'm going to ask you to start playing. Our kindergarten teachers are going to come into the middle of the space and they are going to interact with you. So they need you to play to be able to interact with you. And you can play in whatever way you want. You can play as you think a 5-year-old might play. You can play as you want to as a grown-up, you can play by yourself, or you can play with a friend. You might decide that your toys work better with someone else's toys. But I'm gonna give you a few moments to play. And as you play, our kindergarten teachers are gonna come in and they're gonna do that interaction with you to help model for you what it would feel like for kindergartners to interact with their teachers as they play. So we'll just give you maybe another minute to play, even though it's fun. I think our kindergarten teachers have had a chance to interact with everyone to do a little modeling. So I would like to extend a big thank you to our kindergarten teachers, and I will invite them to have a seat. They didn't want to present. They told me they would interact with you, but I had to be on the microphone. No, we'll collect them at the end. So it's going to be hard to stop playing, and I'm okay if you need to play as I talk, but I do want to unpack what you just experienced a bit. So I'm going to ask the board to share their thoughts on some reflection questions. So of course you're adults. Of course we front-loaded the standards. Of course our teachers were able to kind of talk you through what they would do. But my first question for you is, what did you notice? A soft approach, okay. Any other noticings with how the teachers interacted with you when you played?
So they were paying attention to what we were doing, and they were participating and not interrupting.
Mhm.
They were asking some academic questions. Counting or shaping or sorting, those kind of things.
Right, and so those two standards we had were around counting and sorting, weren't they? And so the materials I picked for you tonight were things that my hope was that there would be some opportunities for kindergarten teachers to engage with you around those concepts. So a think about is, was it necessary, you're the students, was it necessary for all of the students here tonight to play in the same way to access the standards? Was that necessary? No, our kindergarten teachers didn't need to say, everybody now build a tower, count the tower, and think about how many would there be if we added one more. They didn't need to say, everybody's going to build a zoo and we're going to count the animals. And my third question to reflect on is, was every student able to engage with a standard by choosing their own learning path? And that's kind of how it works with play. Play isn't the only thing we do in kindergarten, but play is very purposeful. One of the resources we provide for our teachers is prompts that can be by every station to help support teachers in what are the types of questions that help solicit that academic learning as students are playing. Teachers are very engaged with their students as they play. Now, I love to go to kindergarten classrooms. I do it as much as I possibly can. It's a very joyful place. But I don't see the impact on kindergarten the same way our teachers do. So I want to bring in two different quotes tonight from teachers in our district around the impact of play. And the first comes from Stacy Brand, who is our task force member at Talahi. And Stacy shares this. She says, last year I had a student at the beginning of the year who was not connecting with me or other students. He struggled to interact with others without disrupting them during play. I took playtime to find what he was gravitating towards and used it to motivate him and to help facilitate positive interactions with me and other students. By the end of the year, he was inviting students to play with him, sharing and engaging positively with other students. We also made such a connection, he will shout my name from the bus window just to make sure we can say hi. And Heather Strait from Oak Hill, a longtime kindergarten and teacher in District 742, shares this. I am so proud of ISD 742 for recognizing and supporting the need of play for our youngest learners. Many years ago, there was a push to increase the academic rigor in kindergarten. Students suffered from this both academically and socially. Young children learn through play and hands-on experiences. By having more focused playtime, we can help them with social skills and increase their stamina in all academic areas, leading to an increase in academic skills. Students make choices, learn how to share, speak up for themselves and others, problem solve and collaborate, all through the time allowed to play. This is positive in every way for kindergarten. And I could not leave you without, a little video of kindergartners playing. I did tell Cabinet this is going to be the cutest presentation you're going to see all year. And so I would like you to enjoy some video of kindergarten students in actually Mrs. Stang's class, who's here with us tonight, in her kindergarten classroom at Westwood.
So when children for them to be really thoughtful and mindful. Children play and they use their brain to make a plan. Okay, what do you want to take out? What's your plan?
I think I will take out a baby.
You're going to take out a baby? Oh, are you coming to play too in the kitchen? Are you going to play with the baby? Yeah. Tell me about what you're going to do.
Play in the dollhouse.
Play with the dollhouse? Are you going to make some food? What kind of food? Who are you going to give the food to?
People in our family.
People in your family. I'm watching children play. I can see that there was intentional decision making, that they made choices about how to use their time, what materials to play with, who to play with. I can also see children problem solving. They identify and create problems, sometimes without even knowing it, but then they have to make a plan to solve it. What happens if the train track runs out? What happens if all of my toys fall down? When I'm drawing a picture, how do I know what to do next? I really like to ask kids when they're playing what they're doing and what they're going to do next, because it really unveils for me the intentionality that we don't always see when we watch kids play. There is a clear plan in their minds about how to move forward, whether that's as an individual drawing a picture or whether that's with a friend figuring out how the two are going to come together. So when you watch children play, you're watching their creativity, you're watching their problem solving, their curiosity, you're watching them think critically. All of the important life skills that we know kids need, we can see when we watch kids play if we know what to look for. And when we talk to kids, they articulate over and over for us the really intentional, mindful work they're doing.
What are you doing in your art?
I'm making some potatoes things and little circles.
You're making potatoes and circles?
Yeah.
How did you know how to make potatoes?
Like this.
And that makes potatoes?
Yeah.
Do you like to draw potatoes?
Yeah.
So before I leave you tonight, I just wanted to share 3 last pictures. And my hope in sharing these pictures is as you think about what you see more than kids examining worms and building a train track and pretending to be a cashier. My hope is that you see students engaging and contributing to a positive climate and culture. I hope you see learning that's producing positive outcomes. And I hope you see students who are innovators and becoming career and college ready. Thank you for your time tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Monica?
So do you know what regions of the world are all these animals?
Do I know the regions of the world for all those animals? I don't know that I do.
But I do notice that you have animals from many regions of the world. And the teacher knew.
That's why they're here. They're the experts.
Scott? And then Natalie?
I'm trying to get a little bit of the history. You said that under Reagan, they started collecting data. And then apparently they had enough data collected that under Bush, they came up with No Child Left Behind. Sort of how it worked out. What is behind the switch from No Child Left Behind to this? What is the academic studies or how did this happen? How did they know that there's a brain development that is taking place that's different?
I think that's a good question, Scott, and I think that, we really rely on the educational researchers who are out in the field conducting that research. And as we look at what is new and coming into our field, we have to pay attention to that. And as researchers are sharing with us, there are studies done that help us look at the long-term effects on students. We are able to see that long-term, there isn't always this benefit to just doing things earlier and faster. There is a benefit for students really being self-empowered, being able to exist as part of a community of learners, being able to understand how I learn and how I make choices about my learning. And all of that happens through play and builds that foundation. And so when we had this switch to increasing academics, it wasn't that it was from a place of taking play away from children. It was really just thinking through, if we know the intended outcomes in 3rd grade are here, how do we work backwards? But in working backwards, there's more than one way to do that. And play actually does give us a very strong foundation, and that when kindergartners who have spent time with both direct instruction and standards and play-based learning go to 1st grade, they're very prepared for that learning that happens there. There isn't necessarily a need to rush things earlier. We can trust that process of relying on developmentally appropriate education and know that we're setting kids up to do what they need to do in 1st grade. But I think across the nation, it was such a big shift that there were people really trying to think through, do we need to do something different to be ready for these assessments? We've never done them before. What do we need to do? So some of it was that new learning, and then it's sometimes unlearning practices that we have new research that show us maybe aren't as effective as we thought.
Okay. You talked about coming up with something for Schoology. What was involved in that?
A lot. We really had to break down what are the types of learning teachers needed to do. So a lot of it was foundational. What is the why behind play? Some of the research that you saw tonight was much more robust and in-depth. So teachers got a chance to do some learning around the why of play. Then they got to do some learning around what is the student's role in play, the teacher's role in play. And then that very practical, hands-on, what types of activities can I put out for students to help them learn math, to help them learn literacy? And then like videos. So our kindergarten classrooms have different spaces. Some are bigger than others, some are smaller. You saw the sensory table, right? A really concrete example of how these kindergarten teachers help them each other out is when a kindergarten teacher said, I don't have room for a big sensory table in my space. These teachers said, here's how you use a Rubbermaid tub. Here's how you modify. Here's how you store these things. Here's how you rotate. So it went from that big why, that philosophical, all the way down to how do we manage this in a way that really works for kids. So it was a robust course, and a lot went into it.
Okay. I never really thought of kindergarten teachers doing a classroom schedule. Explain that to me.
You know, schedules are a big part of the day. We have lunch, we have recess, we have the time we go to music, the time we go to art class. So schedules do drive where people need to be and when. But teachers really have to think through how their students move through the day, especially in kindergarten. When do we need a break for movement? When do we need an opportunity to gather on the rug? And what's the stamina for 5-year-olds around that? And so a schedule might be a little different than what we would think as adults in a schedule, but by making that district commitment to scheduling play twice a day, it really held up that commitment that we have for it. So asking teachers to think through how do we build that in our schedule, gave permission for that play to happen, and also helped them to think through how do I want my kindergartners to navigate this day? How do I want them to have a variety of experiences? So the schedule helps us get to where we need to be, but it also helps us look at the day as a whole and think, what will kids engage in throughout the day?
Okay. It never really occurred to me that kindergartners had standards. I mean,
They do.
tell me a little bit about standards and how they're created.
That is a process that we have through the state of Minnesota, and it is a long process. I don't know, Lori, do you want to get into that, or do you want me to do the whole process of standards? How much do you want to know, right? They aren't created by our school district, right? They're created at the state level, usually through a very long multi-year process, and they're created in all content areas, and those are reviewed separately. So math kindergarten standards are reviewed separately from literacy. It doesn't just come in a package of kindergarten, we get them for each content area.
Okay, and somehow you condense it all to Schoology.
Not necessarily. The Schoology was really the professional learning for teachers so that they could understand how to implement the play-based learning. The standards are what drives instruction in our kindergarten classrooms.
Do you still do nap time?
Don't do that. We do a quiet time sometimes.
Quiet time? Oh, okay. When I went to school, it was nap time. And the one kid that fell asleep always got ribbed about it.
That was the same for me.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Natalie and then Al.
I really enjoyed your presentation, and when my teacher gave me a high five, I felt happy. And it just made me think when you're talking about student SEL or social emotional learning growth, that is how we measure success. So what would be an example of a growth area in SEL for kindergarten that you're looking at through play-based learning?
Teachers brought up even in their quote. So interacting with other students is a great one that we look at in kindergarten. So students come to us with all kinds of life experience prior to kindergarten, but that varies. Some kindergartners are existing in a space with other 5-year-olds for the very first time. And so those interactions would be a really specific example. How are students able to move away from parallel play into that cooperative play? Are they able to initiate finding a friend and inviting them to play. I love Stacy Brand's quote where she talks about at the beginning of the year, a child was really struggling, and by the end, it wasn't just that he could play without struggling. He was the one doing that, inviting, that setting up, and empowering him to be able to be in charge of his learning, but also that social and emotional relationship building in the classroom. So that's just one example, Natalie, of what we would really look for in kindergarten as growth, social and emotionally.
And that sort of SEL growth reminded me of what my kids went through in preschool. And so then it made me think, because we don't have funding for state mandated preschool, like you said, some of our kids are coming to the classroom for the first time, and that can be that can be fun and challenging at the same time, I'm sure. So talking last night and just in general about, things way ahead of kindergarten, like graduation rates and things of that nature, I found it very interesting, the quote that said that students perform better in their later school years if they have active child-initiated early learning experiences. So is this like free play, and then when they get to decide what they want to do and how they want to do it, is that what that means?
Yeah, that's really a big part of play. And there are times that a kindergarten teacher will make an instructional decision to say, hey, I want to use this play-based learning to really dig into sorting. So I'm going to intentionally choose toys that help students sort. But more often than not, it is that child-initiated play. Mrs. Olson talked to some of the board members before the meeting started about how she has a choice board. Our teachers do a masterful job of introducing materials to students, and it is often one or two at a time. We all learn how to play with the blocks, and when we all know how to play with the blocks, then we add this, then we add that. And in doing that, kids are very successful, but they're also aware of the expectations and they know their choices. So when I visited Mrs. Stang's classroom, I got to talk to one of the little girls at the art station, and I asked her why she chose that. And she said, well, I tried everything first. And I know now that art is my favorite. So they do have that decision-making piece there, but by doing that child-initiated play, our teachers know they can help students grow academically kind of no matter what. And that child-initiated play is all around our mission statement: engage, empower, inspire. Those are the core pieces that we allow children to do when they do that child-initiated play.
Thanks, Laura.
It's a great presentation. I find it really interesting, and I look at things a little bit differently, maybe a little different, more abstractly or something. With the dates that you were giving in your presentation, one of them was about 1984. Ronald Reagan started to change the way that education was being delivered. No Child Left Behind into the Bush years. And and we're attributing a lot of how education was delivered and the move away from play to those types of intentional decisions. But in my little world that I live in, I kind of look at it and I go, the other things that were going on back in 1984. Well, first of all, let me say, when I played as a kid, played with blocks, played with other kids in the neighborhood. You'd play kick the can, things like that. But it was you had to find something to do. Right about 1984, play changed to a little game called Pong, where there was a dot that went back and forth on the screen, and you'd bang it around with your little paddle like this. You could spend hours playing your friends playing on this screen. And then over the course of the next few decades, those games got better, they got more interactive, and screen time became the main focus of how to play. And I didn't see any buckets filled with
There were no
iPads or
tonight.
anything like that for the kids to go play with, but it's almost, instead of, I would say that so much play got switched to the internet and interactive screen time type things that kids kind of forgot how to play. And to me, this looks more like a reintroduction to how to play in the physical world, which there is a lot more, what was the word you used? Feedback, emotional feedback, and there's just the sensory feedback when you're playing with things instead of on something.
And I'm really glad you brought that up, Al, because this last July, too, our Minnesota State Legislature has new legislation around the amount of screen time that can be in classrooms. And that is really in response to what is developmentally appropriate and needed for kindergartners. We do know we have kindergartners who come to us who don't have these resources at home, and their play tools at home are often screens. And we know from the American Association of Pediatrics what those regulations are around screen time and what's really good for kids' brain development. Our kindergarten teachers will tell you over and over again about how physical, gross motor, and fine motor has changed since screen time has gone up. And right, it is social and emotional learning, it's academic growth, but it's also things like gross motor, fine motor, hands-on, interacting with other people. That's all so critical for young learners to develop, and you hit the nail on the head when you bring that up.
Yeah, I know one of the vendors that I deal with is Melissa and Doug.
They have great stuff.
They're doing a big push towards play. I mean, the name of their marketing program right now is just Play. And it has a lot to do with creating toys, more just making a kid use their imagination to put things together rather than taking that away from them and just occupying, that's what the screens do. I think they take all the creativity. You can be creative on a screen, but it kind of takes the creativity away from you, that it's harder to be creative with a set of blocks or all of these little toys that you have. So
It's amazing to watch what kids come up with.
Yeah.
Just shooting that video was about the most entertaining time I've had, because they come up with these amazing things that you're just blown away on the daily. And I think my kindergarten teachers might be nodding behind me that, yeah, when given the resources to spark that curiosity and that imagination, kids do that.
Anyone else? Thank you all for coming tonight, for giving us your time. I know you work hard during the day, and here you are letting us experience this. We appreciate your time and everything you do. And leave it to you guys to bring the classroom to us so we can experience it ourselves instead of just
Monica,
telling us about it.
Not sure how I'm going to get those away from you.
Correct.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh.
And we will come and grab your toys now, so we don't disrupt anyone
Okay.
else's presentation.
Thank you.
We gotta keep our schedule, our kindergarten schedule. No, we're gonna.
I think you've got a fence upstairs. I love the ones that are up here.
there's some dancing down in the cities around.
Lakeshore.
Yeah, Lakeshore Learning. They sell a lot of this stuff.
Expensive though,
Oh, yeah.
it's very expensive.
Good for expensive?
Anytime that we have to buy any toys as a district and use contractors, it costs a lot. My wife goes out to the garage sale and buys everything that you have in front of her, it costs $4.
All right. Next, we have a transitional services update. And Kay Nelson, our Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, do you want to introduce
I
the
will.
team here?
Thank you, Chair Hawes, members of the board, and Superintendent Putnam. It is indeed my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Locke and Rebecca Grenwald, who are going to give an overview of the great work they do with our transitional services program. Thank you.
So So thank you so much for having us back again. For those that don't remember, I'm Jen, and I've worked for the program for about 14 years. Rebecca has worked for about 5, and we are the homeless liaisons, excuse me, for District 742.
To recap from last year, this is the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness, which defines homelessness as lacking a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. Oh, sorry. You can see on this slide examples of what that may look like. Shared housing, motels, vehicles, and shelters. Unaccompanied youth refers to students not residing with a custodial parent or guardian, and make up approximately 11% of our students identified as homeless. This slide shows the number of students that have been identified annually in our district over the past several years. So far this year, we have identified 361 students compared to 241 at this same time last year. These numbers reflect students from all ethnic, racial, and religious backgrounds and include students from every school in our district. However, students of color are disproportionately represented, with 257 students being students of color. We are on pace to identify over 700 students this year.
As a reminder, the federal law that governs the education of homeless children is called the McKinney-Vento Assistance Act. It requires that we remove barriers to education for students experiencing homelessness, which includes the items listed on this slide: immediate enrollment without waiting for school records or requiring any verifications, transportation to the school of origin, free school meals, and access to all programming available to house students.
McKinney-Vento eligibility is certified by the district homeless liaisons. Once a student has been certified homeless, he or she will remain eligible for services throughout the entire school year. Families that are homeless longer than the school year must be recertified each year. We connect with families through a variety of ways. Many families self-identify. They hear of our services through word of mouth. The Welcome Center connects us to families during the registration process. School staff, including counselors, social workers, secretaries, teachers, and administrators, make referrals and provide our contact information to families. Additionally, area organizations such as Pathways for Youth, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services, Promise Neighborhood, Too Much Talent, county workers, shelters, and most motel staff reach out to us when they encounter families in transition. We have this poster displayed in schools and throughout the community, and we speak at local organizations to raise community awareness.
These are the shelters available to families and unaccompanied youth in our district. 15% of the families and youth identified as homeless so far this year are living in one of these shelters: the Salvation Army, Place of Hope West, Anna Marie's, Alliance, 180 Degrees, and the Youth House.
Our families and students are faced with many of the challenges you see above every day. Food is an ongoing issue for many of our families. Several do not have the capacity to store food, especially fresh items, and may only have access to microwaves to prepare meals. Utilizing food shelves is often an all-day endeavor. For those working parents who rely on public transportation, being able to access the food shelves is an overwhelming challenge. Education takes a backseat to surviving daily life.
Here you can see some of the programs or services our program provides, essentially doing what we can to remove any barriers preventing students from attending school. In an effort to assist with enrollment, we go to shelters, motels, temporary residences, wherever families are to enroll students. Transportation support may take the form of school buses, taxis, Metro bus cards, and on rare occasion, Uber and Lyft gift cards purchased using donated funds. Additionally, we offer school supplies and clothing. Removing barriers faced by our homeless families can take a variety of forms and goes beyond enrolling and transporting homeless students. Almost all require funding. Fortunately, we've had LEAF and ARP ESSER funds, which we'll talk about later, to help address these needs. Finding affordable housing is an ongoing issue, and for those with tarnished credit or criminal backgrounds, it's especially difficult. We often use our donated funds to help with move-in costs, partnering with Good Samaritan, the county, or Promise Neighborhood to help cover deposits that are doubled more often than not to compensate for renting to high-risk families. We've helped acquire and pay for birth certificates and state IDs, purchased clothing, reached out to local churches and organizations for help with laundry. We've partnered with area businesses to provide haircuts and cultural hair care at little to no cost. Resolving transportation barriers has us working with local businesses to provide discounted or free towing and car repairs. using donated funds to cover remaining costs. We've used LEAF funds to purchase car tabs to ensure the vehicle a family was residing in wouldn't be towed, or they wouldn't be further burdened with fines, court costs, etc. We paid for driver's ed for a student that aged out of foster care and behind the wheel for an unaccompanied youth who was couch hopping after the death of a parent. And our community is no exception to the shortages of childcare options that are reported nationally. Our time spent trying to assist students and single working parents access childcare has increased significantly.
For the past 2 years, we have been providing tutoring at Talahi Elementary. The focus is on literacy skills for transitional students needing academic support. Last year, students showed growth in several areas with average increases of 64 points in STAR reading, 14% in letter recognition, 22% in sound identification, and 28% in sight word recognition. We are set to begin tutoring at Talahi again 4 days a week this fall after the close of the fall STAR testing window in October. Promise Neighborhood offers an after-school tutoring program that many of our students participate in. With assigned release of information, we are able to provide STAR instructional planning reports, teacher concerns, usernames and passwords for learning platforms, as well as missing assignments for the tutors to focus on. We were able to see an average growth of 44 points on the STAR reading and 30 points on the STAR math assessments for the students that participated. This year, we are expanding to work with another local community program, Too Much Talent, in the same capacity.
We work with a variety of local community organizations. We have a strong relationship with the shelters in our community and have streamlined the process to assist our families with accessing resources and reducing the time spent homeless. Some of the local businesses that have provided tremendous support to our program and families include Once Upon a Child, Royal Tire, Andy's Towing, RBC, and the St. Augusta Legion. The St. Cloud Police Department has repeatedly donated large quantities of new coats and boots. We received donations of school supplies from HRA, Beaver Island Brewing, Great River Federal Credit Union, and United Way in partnership with Impacts.
We work very closely with LEAF, the Local Education and Activities Foundation, to support our families. LEAF recently staged a fundraising campaign to benefit the Homeless Student Services Fund. Including the funds raised during this campaign, this fund has generated over $230,000 to help the families in our community. You can see by this slide a breakdown of our expense and the number of students served by these funds from September 2021 to September 2022. The ARP ESSER funds have been used to support our students and families with clothing, phones and minutes, sundries, eyeglasses, teacher and extended liaison time, transportation, and short-term emergency motel stays under very specific circumstances.
For the future, we've continued to express our hope for site-based supportive housing in our community. We've had some involvement with Lutheran Social Services' new supportive housing program through the One Roof initiative called Keeping Families Together. This program is aimed at providing housing and support to families involved in child protective services in Benton and Sherburne counties. At this point, it doesn't include Stearns County and uses the scattered site model. The Minnesota Department of Housing will accept RFPs for Homework Starts with Home, again sometime during the first quarter of 2023. Additionally, we've begun to explore the possibility of hosting a resource fair for our families in August to help facilitate registration, school supply distribution, community resource referrals, early childhood referrals, etc. It would benefit our families, the Welcome Center, us, and transportation if we can get a head start with enrolling and transferring students as needed. We would like to incorporate staff from the Welcome Center, early childhood, and community ed, as well as outside organizations to help connect families with resources. We would require a large enough space to potentially accommodate 200 to 300 people, is our hope.
Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions for us?
Al?
I'll start. Yeah, you have an impossible job. So far, we've identified 363 students this year. And you said that we'll end up, we're on track to approximately 700 and some for the year. Last year was 600 and some students. How long do you work with a typical student? I mean, do we have 700 that are here all year? Or do they move in and out? Do we, do people move in and out of homelessness, and do they move in and out of the district? And is,
Families do move in and out of the district, but once a student is identified, he or she will stay on our list for the entire year because sometimes they leave and they come back. Some families, it varies from family to family. Some families require a lot of ongoing support. Some families need support one time and we never hear from them again.
as I said, it's kind of just an impossible position, because you're put into a position of working with people who need a lot, and you don't have a lot to, I mean, I don't take this wrong. I'm not saying you don't have a lot to offer. I'm just saying you don't have the infrastructure to offer what they need. And that makes it very, very difficult. And every one of these kids, I mean, if there's 700 kids in our school district that don't have a place to go home to at night, and oftentimes don't get to eat. And I mean, there's just a lot of things that they're worried about that take priority over an education. And 700 students is about 700 students is about isn't that about 15? No, it's about 7%, about 10% of our student population is wondering where they're going to go that night, and if they're going to get to eat that night, if they're going to be safe that night, where they're going to be tomorrow. That's 10% of our student population, and then we expect them to perform great on the tests when we give them tests, and we expect them to, and if they're not proficient or up to grade level, that's a strike against both the district and the student. And I can't imagine that our surrounding districts compared to us would be anywhere near 10% of their students being homeless or in crisis in that way. It's just, I mean, it's just one where, man, there's just not an answer.
Well,
But thank you for what you do.
permanent supportive housing would go a long way to help those kids.
You say that, and yes, it would, but it wouldn't, because you couldn't possibly keep up with it. Because if you were able to give every homeless family permanent supportive housing, we'd have more homeless people coming to the area, and it would be a never-ending, you couldn't catch it. You couldn't catch up to it. It isn't a St. Cloud can fix this issue. It's a national problem. Every state in the country, every city in every state, every school district in every state, we all face at some level. Some school districts don't. They're in areas that don't have a whole lot of homelessness. But I think every school district to some degree has students who are homeless at any given time during the year. And I mean, Sartell, which is a fairly wealthy suburb of St. Cloud, I don't think they have the homelessness that we have, but they do have homeless students in Sartell. They're not 100% living in homes with people who care for them. So, I mean, it's just, I don't know. Like I said, it's just a really, really difficult problem, and I don't know what the answer is.
Zach, and then Scott, and then Natalie, and then Monica.
So, no buts. We have that goal, right? Permanent housing. And, or you want to rephrase that term?
Homework starts with home, is that what we're talking about? Or permanent supportive housing?
Permanent supportive housing.
That's my goal.
Mine too. And it is for many districts across the country. We're looking at a 17% national childhood poverty rate. It just has been going up for years. It doesn't stop. So this is an everybody problem, and we're all in this together, right? I mean, if we don't do something about it, we all pay the price, and I'll just see more of them in my job. So short-term goals and then long-term dream goal of permanent supportive housing. Can you just give us a brief kind of mini dream goal that you would like us to focus on, or how we can help you with that?
How can you help me with that? FHPAP still sort of is the biggest roadblock for us because in our area, the Lutheran Social Services are the only recipients of federal home dollars. And they have two sub-grantees, which is Catholic Charities for the youth piece and RISE for the single adult piece. You have to have FHPAP, somebody who's receiving FHPAP, when you apply for a Homework Starts with Home grant or a lot of the other Minnesota housing grants, use Housing Trust Fund dollars or FHPAP dollars. So that is something difficult that we're not quite sure how to get around. I don't know that there's anything the board can help us do with that, but we are looking into it and trying to make some partnerships and talking to whoever will listen. So I think going forward, that's our biggest obstacle. And once we figure that piece out, it'll open a lot more doors for us.
I'm a little bit concerned about this housing thing. We're not in the housing business, we're in the education business. We're certainly not in the landlord business. I mean, we could go on trying to help the impoverished forever, but we got to be able to draw a line too. Like Al said, they'll be coming from all over the country if we could house them all. But we're not in the housing business. We make referrals. HRA is in the housing business, but we are not.
This would be a partnership if we're talking about Homework Starts with Home with HRA and the county. We would not be the landlords, but studies have shown that these programs work best when the county, HRA, and the school district are all working together to support these families. So it's not about us being a landlord. It's not about us kicking people out or inviting people in. It's about us all working together in a program that supports families, that includes housing.
It helps. 'Cause I know we make referrals, but we don't want to be owning housing. We don't want to be landlords. It's not our job. I think that's, we have a very high percentage of people on free and reduced lunch in St. Cloud. I think we just had the statistics released and it was almost 80%. Our students are on free and reduced lunch, whereas the districts that are surrounding us, it's nowhere near that. When people are trying to evaluate our district, we got to remember we are dealing with a lot of poverty people compared to the districts around us. Also, the enrollment figures show that 25% of our students are involved in English language instruction. And the districts around us, it's nowhere close. We get compared with districts that don't have the problems that we're trying to solve, that you're trying to solve. I think that's it. Thank you.
Listen, y'all, come on now. What doesn't matter to families who are homeless is what districts are doing around us. They don't care. it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters to these folks, what matters to folks who are homeless is what we can do. And I remember last time having some of these same conversations. We aren't the experts on what's going to help kids who are experiencing homelessness. These guys are. For years and years, they're the experts. And so, I mean, this is something we met for a year when I first was on the board, because this is something that is so important to me, and it's actually so important to all of us. But it's tough to me to hear as a board member, things like we have to draw the line somewhere and then just more of them are going to come here. That should, and we can't do everything. That's not growth mindset thinking that we're asking our teachers to do and we're asking people in our district to do. There are things we can do, and this program has been, I mean, if you're not super familiar with it, we spent a year looking at it, and it was these ladies that shared it with me, and it's had great success where it has been done here in Minnesota. So I would just caution us as to what we're saying, and when the community is listening, saying, well, we have to draw the line somewhere. No, we don't. No, we don't. These are every kid, every day. I need every kid to feel safe. We need to do anything we can to help the 7 to 10% of these kids. They're just kids, for crying out loud. They aren't asking for this. And really, neither are the parents. Nobody wants to live like this. Okay. So, and partnering with HRA is great, but HRA doesn't have housing. So, like, if we're saying, well, those people are handling it, there is no housing to be had. So it is definitely a community-wide problem. And $230,000 is so great from LEAF, but it's just nothing. It's nothing. And it's those Band-Aid solutions that are all y'all can do right now, because we don't have that permanent supportive housing solution. And I know it breaks your heart to do Band-Aid solutions, because you know what is needed, and thanks for doing that anyway. The two questions I have are, what is the barrier for Lutheran Social Services for that FHPAP issue? Why did they say again they wouldn't do it?
Well, they did partner with us the first time we applied. It wasn't a very well-written grant. Now they've partnered with Keeping Families Together. I'm not sure that they're open to other opportunities. There's been a lot of turnover in Lutheran Social Services right now, and I don't have the contacts there that I just had a few months ago. So the only barrier could potentially be that they're not open to another housing program, because the dollars are limited for our area, and they may already be spoken for.
So does it have to come out of their current FHPAP loan, or is it more dollars coming in, but the same way they're already getting dollars?
They're allocated a certain amount of FHPAP based on the point in time counts for our area.
Oh, okay.
So the housing, or the homeless population. So it is a set amount. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're asking them for a percentage, basically, of their HPAP. I'm just wondering out loud, and I think I might have said this last time too, if there's something we can do on an administrative level to talk with Lutheran Social Services and just support these guys in that. And I'm happy to have a meeting if it takes that, having to do anything really, and to maybe, first of all, know who it is that's going to make the decision. And then what's the time frame for the decision? If they would have to say yes by when?
They said they were going to be looking for RFPs sometime during the first quarter of 2023 is as close as they narrowed it down at this time.
Okay.
So we would need to be getting our ducks in a row very soon with who we're going to partner with, if Lutheran Social Services would be on board. And yeah.
They would write the grant?
Well, they did last time. I probably would try to do something different this time.
Okay, that was the barrier last time. Okay. All right. I could talk about this for days, but my last question is, if resource and time wasn't a barrier, I know besides permanent supportive housing, what do you need?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Everything, every situation's different, so it's hard to say, oh, if we had just had this, I mean, other than the permanent supportive housing,
Yeah.
it's really hard to say, we just need this one thing, because we never know what to expect.
So it's that flexibility with that LEAF money that really allows you to serve families in the way they need to be served.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great.
And I can tell you some things that are working besides LEAF. LEAF has been wonderful. We're able to meet almost every need that's requested of us. Clothing, food,
That's amazing.
um,
That's great.
emergency shelter under the right circumstances. Our transportation has been phenomenal in getting these kids routed and to school very, very quickly. Our Welcome Center has done a great job when we've come to them and say, this kid needs to get in. They got to get in now. So there's a lot that's working right. So
That's great. Thanks for all the time and energy that you put in every day. We really appreciate you guys.
thank you.
So thank you for coming. I had the question that you had been asked already about, like, what do I do? And you have already answered that question. But as everybody was talking, what I wanted to tell you that I really appreciate you coming and attempting to educate us in this. And I said attempting because for a person like me that has never suffered homelessness, it is really hard for me to wrap my head around what does that really mean. And as I was thinking and reflecting about that, I also have realized that I may have worked or known people that are in poverty that looks the different in many different ways, but I have not probably knowing at least work or being in a long-lasting relationship with a person that is homeless. And I like you to tell us a little bit more about how does that look like. I'm interested in it, as I said, it's really hard to understand, it's really hard to come up with solutions or what else I can do for this other than give you money and say, okay, let's have a house here, which I do know enough to know that giving a house to a person is not going to solve their homelessness. So some of the things that I was wondering as you were presenting and talking about is, we're talking about kids that are homeless, but I am, and that, when we talk about kids that are homeless, because we are an educational institution and that we're concerned about the education of those children, well, the first thing is that comes to my mind is a kid homeless, nobody caring for. But as I think and reflect about it, you're talking about families that are homeless, and the kid, it's not that the kid doesn't have anybody to care for them, right? Is they have a family that are juggling too many things, but they are do caring for the kids. Is that how does it look like? How is that? I don't know if there is a common experience or more often things that you see, but how is that experience that you're seeing? If it's anything that you can share about that.
Sadly, I think we do have kids who aren't being cared for. We have a fair amount of unaccompanied youth right now, children who are dropped off with friends or relatives who maybe do or don't want them to be cared for. We have unaccompanied youth couch hopping for as long as a friend's parent will let them stay. We have, all of those situations. We have kids, 4 or 5 kids in a family sleeping in one hotel room, and then trying to get up in the morning and go to school, get ready for school after limited sleep. We have kids sleeping in their cars.
We have multiple families doubled up, or multiple families in one dwelling where 2 or 3 of the families aren't on the lease and can be asked to leave at any time, or it can jeopardize the leaseholder's housing. So it's so many different things.
So follow up of that. So when I was imagining families trying to take care of themselves and not having a stable place, I was thinking in support needed for those families. But you're also describing children that are kind of on their own. And I did not get to that on my own because I was thinking if children are kind of on their own, isn't the state having some sort of a role there to provide for that child? Shouldn't they be like in a group home or those kind of things if they're on their own? Or what ages are this, or how does this work?
Well, not necessarily. Homelessness is not a reportable child protection issue. So students wouldn't necessarily be taken in by the county for being homeless. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
You are. I'm just very surprised. I mean, being homeless for a child is also abuse in my book. I mean, I did not think that was not a role for the state.
If child protection were to get involved with every family that was homeless, we would never identify any of them. They would not come forward. They would not seek help. So that wouldn't be a good thing. Thank you.
First, I want to ask a question. One of the services provided to homeless is the providing transportation to the home school, no matter where someone may reside, and that can be really complicated and difficult to provide transportation. I mean, they may live in Monticello and attend Madison, and we'd have to provide transportation to that individual student. How many students how many students are using that service? How many students are we picking up from, say, alternate locations and busing? Most would reside within the district, yes, but picking up from alternate locations and transporting to schools that would be outside of the routing within that area that they're living.
I would guess maybe 15%, but I've never done the numbers, so I'm not exactly sure. We have a fair amount in Sartell and Sauk Rapids. We have one in Annandale that I know right now, Richmond, Cold Spring. A lot of those are foster care students that have been placed.
Is most of that handled through van service then, or? I mean, I can't imagine how I mean, this is, again, just to the complexity of what you guys work with and deal with, but to me, it just seems very, I mean, it's 15% of the homeless students, so 50 students a day that we're picking up from alternate addresses and bringing into our district. And I understand the reasoning behind it, to allow a student to stay in their school and not bouncing around every time the family moves, but just seems, man, that seems complex to me.
We do have an amazing router. And, I mean, he really takes it serious. I mean, he will do anything he can to help our kids as quickly as he can. So we're very fortunate.
Yeah, again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, I think this is it's a difficult subject, because it's difficult to imagine that we have kids in our schools who don't have a place to go home. I mean, none of us could imagine what it would be like. We're sitting here, we're going to go home to our nice warm homes afterwards and hop in our beds and have a really good night's sleep. And I mean, it's just, everything's going good for all of us. There's nobody sitting here that's homeless. But to have that number of students out there that don't know where they're going at night, or don't have a place to go, or maybe sleeping in cars, vans, buses, whatever, it's a tragedy. It really is a tragedy. I think, and I'm going to say this to my colleague Natalie, I don't think that anybody at this table is saying anything negative when they say things like, we have to draw the line somewhere. If we didn't have to draw a line, we would have solved this years ago. The reality is, the funding that we have only allows us to accomplish certain things. And yes, we have to make a decision. We have to draw lines and say, yes, this is what we can do. And I'm sorry, we cannot do this. We just don't have the funding to do it. That's reality. And I know and I know that you care about it, Natalie. I know that you care passionately, and it's a lot of what you do in your life and with your life. But I don't think that anyone sitting at this table is being no, I don't think that anyone is being dismissive of the horrible situation that we have in front of us, and doesn't feel some level of pain that we can't snap our fingers and fix it. It's a big problem, and it's more than we can do as a district, but it's a big problem nationally.
Alan, Natalie, thank you. I think we've grown a lot as a group and realized what we have in common, and that it's okay for us to have a little different perspective, and that we respect each other, and the whole world could learn from that. So I do think that we've grown as a group, and that we're here today having this conversation, being respectful, that we all care. And this is a huge problem, not only in our district. It's huge in our district compared to other districts, but across the country, where it grows every year, and just as you showed us in our numbers. Thank you for the great work that you both do, and for your huge hearts. You just give and give and care. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to our schools update. Of course, presented by Kay Nelson, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, and then Dr. Mike Rivard, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education.
Thank you, Chair Hawes, members of the board, and Superintendent Putnam. This evening, Assistant Superintendent Nelson and I will share our updates for our preschool, our elementary, and our secondary schools for the month of September. So we will start with our preschool friends, and on the left, we see our youngest students already working together on building things and learning about spatial relationships, and using some of those tools that you saw even our kindergarten students would be using the following year. In the picture to the right, though, we see our children are working on their cutting and their pasting skills and practicing sharing, moving from that parallel play that we're talking about and starting to work towards sharing and collaboration that will become a more part of their kindergarten year also. Our preschools also begin quickly learning their letters. So on the left, you see our 4-year-olds are decorating their first letter of their name, which aids in letter identification, one of those preschool standards. The students in preschool are also working on their drawing, spelling, and learning their colors, and just plain being cute. So I'm going to show a quick video, and we'll see if it works.
My mommy.
You drew your mommy?
Yep.
What does mommy start with?
My mom's letter starts with, my mom's name starts with M-O-M.
Nice job. What are you coloring now?
The sky.
The sky?
Yep.
Is it a green sky?
Blue sky.
Good job.
But the clouds are going to be white, not green.
Okay.
So our 3-year-old preschooler there was learning and talking about her colors, how to spell the word mom, knowing the letters blue, or knowing the colors blue and white, and some of just those darling things that having that preschool experience is so important for.
My mommy.
And I shouldn't make you guys watch it again, but for our other elementary students, we are learning about routine and procedures, and that takes on great importance during the month of September, but it's also a time for celebration. and showing community pride, and some joining with our secondary schools in our homecoming celebrations. So on the left, you'll see our Apollo Eagle mascot out on the basketball court with our Lincoln friends. And then on the right, our Eagle friend has flown all the way out to St. Joseph, and he's with Kennedy students as they're doing a Kennedy homecoming celebration. And we were fortunate enough to have some Apollo students join us at Kennedy with our elementary kids that day. Many of our elementary schools also have School Spirit Week in September as we take time to show pride in our school. Above are pictures from our friends at Madison, where their School Spirit Week included Hat Day and Pajama Day. I'll ask you to take note that our picture on the top left and the top middle show how sometimes even kids and adults can match, and not on purpose. So we have the same jammies and the same hat that just kind of happened on this day between the teacher and their student. And while we are having fun and showing school pride, our students are also back to learning in September. What we see in the pictures above are students working on using math strategies, and the math strategies of CRA, concrete, representational, and abstract, are already at work during the month of September and are very similar to what was presented to you as a school board last year. More importantly, we see collaborative learning already occurring as kids are working on those math assignments and math activities together. And as we end the month of September at our elementary schools, we also see lots of celebrations of student success. So on the left, our Lincoln All-Stars are having the Stars of the Month, and you see Principal Ebnet and Assistant Principal Anderson surrounded by some of those Stars of the Month in the Lincoln Media Center. Our middle picture shows some of those same students all dressed up and ready for that day where they would be up in front of their friends and peers and some family members that would have came in as they received their Star of the Month award. And on the right was a picture that was sent to Principal Ebnet from a parent thanking her and Lincoln staff for all the things they were doing in making that boy was a way to go student for the month of September. So that is my update for this month for preschool and elementary schools, and I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Nelson.
All right, so moving into our secondary schools, you'll see some similar themes. We just had a great presentation on kindergarten play, but I would say that play is important at all ages. So you're going to see a lot of fun play happening here, culture building, and really a lot of celebrations. So our first homecoming was Tiger Homecoming. So this is one of the assemblies, and they also had some school spirit days. So that was Twin Day there. This is Tiger Homecoming Fun, the South style. So again, Jersey Day, and they had all kinds of school spirit days. So those are some fun pictures. This is a little different twist. This video, I'm going to show you a video here. It was sent to me by Assistant Principal Sasha Hansen. This is at North, but this is one of our brand new music teachers. And so I asked him, you know, what are the kids doing here? And so they were into their rhythm unit, and in the video they are bucket drumming and working on 3-part rhythm to groove and learn the concept of playing in an ensemble, which was one of their vocabulary words. And it was a beautiful day out, and I just thought this was so neat. I thought you might enjoy seeing what they were doing. That looks easy, but it's not easy to get that many kids playing an ensemble. So yeah, that was really neat. And then as Dr. Rivard mentioned, our Apollo Homecoming Court went and did some school visits, and that was a huge hit. So the next slide shows one more video of our famous Apollo Eagle out, and it was just so fun to watch the kids, their joy. So it was kind of fun. And then moving on, again, there we have Kennedy. They had they had a career day, so dress for your future was what those young ladies were up to. And then, of course, our two mascots embracing each other. And then, of course, last week we moved to Apollo's homecoming, so some great pictures from our homecoming football game, which was a beautiful night. We had a tiny little bit of rain, but it was a lovely evening and great family gathering beforehand, so that was really neat. And then this last picture is just, you're going to hear an update in November, so I won't do a spoiler alert here, but this was the Minnesota State High School League Student Forum. We had over 200 students from the region that participated, and it was very well received, and they really did a great job engaging the kids, and all the adults were just on the outside of the gym, and the kids were doing the work with the help of a couple of facilitators, so it was really neat to see. And then I guess I do have one more picture. Last week, McKinley had a career fair that they opened to their parents and students. They had about 40 different businesses that came. We have to give a big shout out to the Greater St. Cloud Development Corporation. Gail Cruikshank helped orchestrate this. We had businesses, we had Centracare there, all kinds of businesses, and they were offering job opportunities. It was just a great way for kids to build those interaction skills with adults, and of course they all had some nice bling, so the kids got to walk away with lots of freebies as well. So that was a really big success. And then lastly, just a couple of upcoming events. We have our Dietu Powwow coming up on November 5th. That'll be held at Tech High School, and there'll actually be 2 grand entry times at 1 and 4. This is the first time we've had it in a few years. It's in conjunction with St. Cloud State, St. Ben's, St. John's, and the Technical College have done this as a yearly event, although COVID put a kibosh on that for the last few years. And then we have family conferences coming up, our National Honor Society induction, and of course now we're moving into the end of our fall athletic season, so we will have some section tournaments and end of season play. And that's it for us, unless you have some questions.
I was just going to say, I think the grand entrance times are 1 and 7.
I say
1 and 4.
I was kidding, it was 1 and 7.
It was just a little
Thank
joke.
you for the correction. I even had it written right in here. Thank you, Natalie.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we are moving on to our board policies. We have a first reading for proposed revised board policy 210, conflict of interest, school board members. Tracy Flinbo, Executive Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations, will be presenting.
Good evening, Chair Hawes, Superintendent Putnam, and board members. We have 5 policies, so I will just roll through all of them tonight. It's my turn, I guess. And all of these policies, I'll just say in preface, are largely driven by state and or federal statute and are mandatory policies for the school district. So starting with Board Policy 210, this is the conflict of interest policy for board members. This policy was updated fairly significantly in 2016, and at the review by Board Development Committee, it was agreed that some of the more robust nature of our updates, that supplement the MSBA policy are wise to keep. And so the only change in the policy that we currently have is just an update of earnings limits for board members who are also employees of the district. That was changed by the legislature this last session from $8,000 per year to $20,000 per year. There are no other recommended changes on this policy. Any questions?
All right, so then next we're moving on to the first reading for proposed revised board policy 410, family and medical leave policy.
Thank you. That's a good trick, Gordy. Okay, 410. This is the family and medical leave policy. Again, a policy that's mandated by federal law in this case, as well as state law. Most of the updates that were recommended by MSBA at this time are simply, as you can see, spelling out United States Code instead of saying USC, and some cleanup of sentences. I'll just roll through so you can see those. Again, just spelling out more clearly what parental needs are under the military sections of leave that are available. In this paragraph, the only changes were switching the word employer to school district, just so it would be more particular to us. And then in the last section, there are special rules that apply to instructional employees around the timing of leaves. And sometimes this becomes a question for teachers, for instance, that are taking a family leave. And there are sub-regulations under the Family and Medical Leave Act that treat instructional employees just slightly differently, recognizing that the way that we lay out a school year and the way childcare leaves might impact the students. We have some parameters that apply to instructional employees that wouldn't apply to employees of kind of 12-month organizations. And so in short, what that means is that if an instructional employee were taking their 12 weeks of family leave, and that leave was going to end the first week of May, let's say, the school district would have the right to ask that employee to extend their leave till the end of the school year so as not to come back for the last 3 weeks and interrupt a relationship that might have been developed between the substitute teacher and the students. And so when we think it's disruptive, where that timing of the return is, we can ask that the employee wait until the end of the leave, or the end of the term, I should say. That additional time that they are out is not counted towards them for FMLA, but we can help better time those leaves in that way. Again, this is just a restatement of the federal law and clarification so that school employees understand that that sub-regulation is here to apply to the FMLA. Those are all the changes in that policy. Any questions about the Family Medical Leave Act policy?
Okay. Next, we have first reading for proposed revised policy 413, discrimination, harassment, and violence.
Hold on. I lost 413. Okay, just a minute. The screen sharing makes the screen so tiny I can hardly find anything. Double click. All right. 413, this is the discrimination, harassment, and violence policy. We updated this last year when we were updating the Title IX policy because these policies overlap and intersect a bit. Again, there's no significant changes to the policy. One of the main changes that will cause most of the red in the policy is in this purpose statement. You'll see that when we talk about protected classes under Minnesota law and in this policy, there's this listing at the front that says that the purpose of this policy is to maintain learning and working environments free of discrimination and harassment based on race, color, creed, religion, national origin, ethnicity, sex, sexual orientation, etc. And the recommended change, because that list appears 5 times in the policy and it's long and cumbersome to say and repeat again and again, is just to use the parenthetical there reference as protected class throughout the rest of the policy. So most of the red in this policy is that there's some cleanup of sentences, a clarification of the definition of disability. Again, that's statutory. That's just the same. And in this sentence on the notification to parties, it only referenced notifying parents of the students that were targets of bullying or harassment, and it just clarifies that we obviously would notify the student target or victim as well as parents and guardians. And a statutory reference. So those are the changes in 413.
Al?
I have a question on this one, Tracy. If you go back up to the top on those. So as a lifelong member of the unprotected class, being a white male, until I reached, what, 50, 60? When all of a sudden then age became, I entered a protected class. But when we changed this policy to me says that we don't allow for any discrimination based upon race, color, creed, religion, sex, age, marital status. It doesn't say anything about a protected class individual. And when we remove that and put in its place that we don't allow discrimination based on protected class, there's a whole group of individuals that are unprotected class.
So you raise an issue that's always been a pet peeve of mine, frankly, as a lawyer and somebody who's trained in this area for 30 years. I so often, I hear people say, have heard people say over 30 years, say, well, I'm not in a protected class. And as I've trained on this for 30 years, I always say, no, look at the list. We all have a race, we all have a gender, we all have a, you can go through that list, and 4 or 5 of them, we're all in some of those boxes, right? So every member of our community, students, staff, volunteers, public, are protected if you're being treated differently or discriminated based on your race, your color, creed, religion. And so the word protected class just says these are the classes of difference that have been recognized under the law, and so we're all in them, right? So when I first saw that change, I was not excited about it because, again, it puts us back into that box where some people think I'm not protected then by this policy. And the way Minnesota law reads is that we are all protected by this policy. So the list is there and the list remains. They're using that phrase protected category as a shorthand, but I worry too.
There were protections at work that were not extended to white males under, and again, I think it's 60. And that bothers me, that I'm one of those people, that bothers me that we're changing this.
Yep.
I'd rather list it out. I don't know, if it's in there 5 times, it doesn't hurt anything.
From my perspective, that's true as well. The MSBA recommended language is to do this, and I think it's just as a matter of convenience. I don't think it adds anything to the policy, and I think it potentially detracts from people fully understanding the protections of this policy.
My recommendation would be to keep it.
Natalie?
Mark this down. I agree with Al. Because you know what I thought is, wait, some protected classes in Minnesota are not protected classes in other, especially gender and sexual orientation are not protected the same way in other states. So my first thought was like, is it just the state? Is it a federal thing? So I also agree to.
It's just using that phrase, protected class, is misleading.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it assumes that some people are protected and others are not.
Yeah.
So.
Do we have any more nods or opinions about?
So the stuff about gender being a protected class, it's actually law. It's not just
Yeah, Minnesota Human Rights Act.
Minnesota Human Rights Act. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go with if Al and Natalie are agreeing, I would like to get on that bandwagon.
Let's just go with that.
Okay.
No, I really share that view. I think that's a good recommendation. Okay, we'll make those
All right.
changes before we bring it back.
Thank you. And then we are moving on to the first reading for proposed revised board policy 414, mandated reporting of child neglect or physical or sexual abuse.
Again, this policy is mandated by state law. There's a change right in the front on the statutory reference in where it's found in Minnesota statutes. Throughout, you just see sentence clarifications largely. Where you see these larger paragraphs of changes, it looks like, wow, they changed a lot. In fact, they've just reordered. Those definitions that are on the front end are on the back end because they alphabetized them and did different things. Go through this all in detail, but I'll tell you there are no substantive changes to the policy. It's just reordering and cleaning it up from a format standpoint. Any questions on mandatory reporting?
Yeah, who are mandatory reporters? Is there a
School employees, let's be clear about that. Anyone who holds a professional license, pastors, preachers, therapists, psychologists, social workers, all of those professional roles are mandatory reporters, and all school employees are mandatory reporters.
even
And all of those
janitor?
categories are in the statute. Anything else on that one?
All right.
Oh, who does the investigations on these reports?
It depends on who the subject of the report is. So if it were a close family member or someone in a position of authority related to the child that's not a school employee, then it would be county or law enforcement. As mandatory reporters, the school simply reports that. We dual report to both the county and law enforcement, and they conduct any investigations that's warranted. If it's a school employee that's alleged to have engaged in maltreatment, then we also report to the Minnesota Department of Education, and MDE does that investigation, sometimes in coordination with law enforcement.
I'm aware that Centricare seems to dump everybody on the cops. Whenever an allegation is made against any of their employees, it's get dumped in the cops and let the police figure it out.
Well, the mandatory reporting laws require that, but as school employees, we also have the Department of Education, who is an investigator. Okay, and then last,
Last one. Woo-hoo. I know Amy's jealous, or she set the bar high for you, so you're doing good. We have policy 415, first reading, mandated reporting of maltreatment of vulnerable adults.
And 415 is just the mirror policy to 414. 414 is for maltreatment of children. 415 is for the maltreatment of vulnerable adults. Again, the same things have happened in this policy. Recommendations. They've moved and changed the definition, super long and broken into some that it's easier to follow. But other than that, and a few statutory references, there are no substantive changes in this vulnerable adult reporting statute policy. Questions on that one? Okay.
We appreciate your expertise there, being able to go through those real quickly. All right, meeting is adjourned. It is 8:38 p.m. Have a good night, and thanks for watching.